Hi again, this is Miss Jessica and I'm back with my last Thanksgiving book, and this one's a bit different. It's called Balloons Over Broadway, and it's the true story of the puppeteer of Macy's Parade. It's written and illustrated by Melissa Sweet. And before we begin, I would like to thank Houghton Mifflin Books for Children for allowing us to read this to you today. So on the inside cover, there's a little bit of information here that I want to read. The Tony Sogg Marionette Book, the toy collection and what came of it. Tony Sogg had long been collecting toys. All his spare money went for toys that were curious or quaint or interesting for one reason or another. Collecting toys is still one of his beloved hobbies. He told the author with glowing eyes that his collection, he believes, is now larger than that at the Kensington Museum in London. This passion for collecting toys is natural enough, for Tony Sogg's grandmother also collected toys and bequeathed him her collection along with her ability with the brush and pencil. Collecting in turn led Mr. Sogg to read all the books on toys which he could find. One of these books, by Dorothy Neville, laments the decay of the marionette stage. A phrase caught and fired his imagination. Would that an artist and enthusiast would revive this ancient art of the theatre? Why should I not be that artist? Tony Sogg asked himself. In his toy collection, he had many ancient marionettes from various countries, and he proceeded to study them. True marionettes are those manipulated from above by means of wires or strings, which give life and motion to the figures as they are handled by the operator or puppeteer. So this is on the inside cover. And this is Anthony Tony Frederick Sogg, and he lived from 1880 to 1942. Every little moment has a meaning of its own. This is a quote by him. From the time he was a little boy, Tony Sogg loved to figure out how to make things move. He once said he became a marionette man when he was only 6 years old. His father had asked him to feed their chickens at 6:30 in the morning every day. Tony had an idea. What if he could feed the chickens without leaving his bed? He rigged up some pulleys and ran rope from the chicken coop door to his bedroom window. That night, he spread chicken feed outside the chicken coop door. The next morning, Tony pulled on the rope and the door to the chicken coop opened. The chickens ate their breakfast. Tony stayed snug in his bed, and his dad, so impressed, never made Tony do another chore. And he has a little drawing here about how he did it. So, number 1, spread feed the night before. Number 2, pull rope. Number 3, door opens. And number 4, chickens come out. Wow. When Tony grew up, he moved to London, where he discovered that no one was making marionettes for kids anymore. So out of wood, cloth, and strings, Tony began to make puppets. He figured out to make his marionettes' movement so lifelike that they performed as if they were real actors. Word soon spread about Tony's amazing marionettes. When Tony moved to New York City, the Tony Sogg marionettes began performing on Broadway. In the heart of New York City, in Herald Square, was the biggest store on earth. R.H. Macy's department store. Macy's had heard about Tony's puppets and asked him to design a puppet parade for the store's holiday windows. So Tony made new puppets based on storybook characters, then attached them to gears and pulleys to make them move. In Macy's Wonder Town windows, Tony's mechanical marionettes danced across the stage as if by magic. All day long they performed to shoppers, jostling for a better look. But Macy's had an even bigger job in store for Tony. Many of the people working at Macy's were immigrants, and as the holidays approached, they missed their own holiday traditions of music and dancing in the streets. Macy's agreed to put on a parade for their employees, and they hired Tony to help. Tony too was an immigrant, so he loved the idea of creating a parade based on street carnivals from all over the world. He made costumes and built horse-drawn floats, and Macy's even arranged to bring in bears, elephants, and camels from the Central Zoo Park. The animals joined hundreds of Macy's employees on Thanksgiving Day 1924, winding their way from Harlem to Herald Square. It was a dazzling parade. In fact, Macy's first parade was such a success that they decided to have one every year on Thanksgiving Day to celebrate America's own holiday. Each year the parade grew, but when Macy's brought in lions and tigers, in addition to the bears, elephants, and camels, the animals roared and growled and frightened the children. Tony, can you think of something spectacular? Okay. Macy's asked Tony to replace the animals. Tony hoped to replace the animals with some kind of puppets, but his marionettes were less than 3 feet tall. He would have to make much larger puppets in order for them to be seen in the parade. And how could he make them strong enough to hold up in bad weather, yet light enough to move up and down the streets? Tony knew of a company in Ohio that made blimps out of rubber, the perfect material for any weather. When he called the company and showed them his sketches, they agreed to make what Tony wanted. Still, how would Tony make his big puppets move? Then Tony had an idea from an Indonesian rod puppet in his toy collection. On Thanksgiving Day, Tony's creatures, some as high as 16 feet, spilled into the streets and the crowds cheered wildly. Part puppet, part balloon, the air-filled rubber bags wobbled down the avenues, propped up by wooden sticks. But now the sidewalks were so packed with people that only those in the first few rows could really see the parade. Tony realized his puppets would have to be even bigger and higher off the ground. And though the sticks helped to steer the puppets, they were stiff and heavy. Tony wanted his balloons to articulate, to move and gesture more like puppets. But how? With a marionette, the controls are above and the puppets hang down below. But what if the controls were below and the puppet could rise up? During the next year, Tony set his new idea into motion. This time, he asked a company in Ohio to make balloons out of rubberized silk, as strong as rubber but lighter than rubber alone. Most important, Tony ordered the balloons to be filled not just with air but with helium too. Since helium is lighter than air, it would make the balloons rise. Once the puppets were completed, they were deflated and shipped back to Tony in New York. Tony did not know if everything would go as planned. It was still dark on Thanksgiving morning when Tony filled the balloons with helium, tethering them down with sandbags. By 1 p.m., the sidewalks were packed with people ready for the parade. Then one by one, Tony cut the lines to the sandbags. Let's have a parade. And the magnificent upside-down marionette rose to the sky. Yes. Nodding and waving to the crowds below, they sailed past Central Park, they sailed down Broadway, they shimmied and swayed through the canyons of New York City. High above the crowd, they flounced in the afternoon wind, pulling the rope handlers this way and that. Yet with every heave-ho, the balloons gestured and articulated like wild puppets, and the crowd screamed for more. After the balloons were eased under the L, they ended in front of Macy's at Tony's Wondertown windows. It was a parade New Yorkers would never forget. And from that day on, every Thanksgiving morning, crowds have lined the sidewalks of New York City to see what new balloons would rise to the skies for Macy's famous parade. Tony Sarg, the puppeteer who loved to figure out how to make things move, had set the stage with a little rigging for a puppet to be anything anyone could imagine it to be. And then this is some notes from the author. It's quite a lot. Let me see what I can read to you. So, this is a quote from Tony Sarg. It says, "I have never done a stroke of work in my life." Tony Sarg's helium-filled balloons debuted in Macy's 1928 Thanksgiving Day Parade. Balloons have risen every year since, with the exception of 2 years during World War II when rubber and helium were needed in the war effort. Tony continued to work on the parade for many years, later collaborating with Walt Disney on the character balloons. Today, more than 40 million people worldwide watch the parade, which is still imbued with the wit and humor of Tony Sarg. Tony's daughter, Mary, once remarked, quite simply, Tony Sarg just never grew up. When he began making puppets, he relied on his childhood love of tinkering and figuring out how things worked. He taught himself how to carve wood, build sets, sew costumes, engineer electronics, and write plays. He had a keen attention to detail and made innovations to performing puppetry, elevating it to an art form that had not been seen before. Many consider Tony Sarg to be the father of American puppetry. But Tony could not have accomplished all he did without his talented apprentices, some of whom went on to their own fame. One of his apprentices, Bill Baird, later created puppets for the Loney Gothard marionette show featured in the movie The Sound of Music. And one of Baird's apprentices was Jim Henson, who invented the Muppets. How cool. Even with no formal art lessons, Tony became one of the busiest artists of his day. But whether he was illustrating his children's books, designing toys, creating animations, or managing his marionette troupe, as it crisscrossed the country, Tony still made time for children. They were his favorite audience. He responded to every letter he received, one of which was simply addressed, Tony Sarg, New York. And there's a letter here. It says, Dear Tony Sarg, please send me 1 king, 2 princesses, 3 fairies, and a devil. I am sure father will pay for them. Also a dragon. And there are a few words about the art. To create the art for this book, this is from the author, I began by making toys and puppets. I played with all sorts of materials, not knowing exactly what the outcome would be. In addition to the watercolor illustrations, my collages are, in fact, a mix of paper from old books to make paper mache puppets, found objects and fabrics all painted or altered to illustrate what it may have felt like to be in Sarge's world. Some of the toys in my illustrations are based on ones from Tony's vast collection, but the actual toys in his books are ones I made. On a few of the pages, I even used Tony's illustrations from the Tony Sarg marionette book. I tried to keep in mind that in everything Sarge did, he conveyed the sense that he was having fun. His legacy reminds me that play may be the most important element in making art. I agree. And that is it, the end. And wow, there is an original advertisement from the New York Times 1933, courtesy of Macy's Ink. This book was so cool. Okay, the end. So I actually want to go and check something out, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I just wanted to check to see what was happening with the parade this year, due to COVID. And I'm happy to see that it's not cancelled, but it's not going to be the same way that they usually have it with the parade with spectators. It's a virtual event, so I'm actually going to tune in this year to see what it's going to be like. So anyway, I hope you guys have a really, really nice Thanksgiving. I know it's not quite the same, but at the end of the day, we still have a lot to be thankful for, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will see you guys next time with some Christmas books, and Christmas is my favorite time of the year. We're actually in the process, we're very late, but we're in the process of finishing up our Christmas decorations in the library, and I hope you guys all come to see just how beautiful it's going to be, and also to borrow some books. We have some new books as well. All right, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.